The door burst open before Elder Rowan could tell me who had hunted my mother. A stranger stood in the doorway, soaked by the storm, his face hidden beneath a dark hood. But he wasn't looking at Rowan. He was looking directly at me. And the moment his eyes met mine, the symbol on my back began to burn. That was when I understood something terrifying. My mother's enemies hadn't disappeared. They had been waiting for me to awaken. The stranger stepped into the healing house. Rainwater ran from his cloak onto the wooden floor. I stood behind Elder Rowan, unable to move. The symbol on my back continued burning beneath my skin. The stranger slowly removed his hood. He was an old man, older than Rowan. His hair was almost completely white, and a long scar ran from his left temple down toward his jaw. But it was his eyes that frightened me. They were silver, not gray, not pale blue, silver, the same color I had seen in my reflection the night before. He looked at me for several seconds, then he lowered his head, not in fear, in recognition. "The heir has awakened," he whispered. My heart pounded. Rowan stepped forward. "You shouldn't have come here." The old man ignored him. His eyes remained fixed on me. "You look exactly like your mother." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You knew her," he nodded. "She saved my life." I stepped around Rowan. "Who are you?" The old man hesitated, then he gave me a name. Kalan. I had never heard it before. But Rowan clearly had. His expression hardened. "You promised never to return." "I promised not to reveal her location." His eyes moved toward me. "She found me first." I looked at Rowan. "You knew him," Rowan sighed. "I knew him before you were born." I felt anger rising inside me. "Then both of you are going to tell me the truth." Neither answered. I stepped closer. "Mother didn't die from an illness." "No," Rowan said quietly. "She was hunted." Voice trembled. "By whom?" Kalan looked toward the windows. "By people who feared what you would become." I frowned. "I don't understand." Looked at the symbol on my wrist. "You were never an ordinary Omega." Those words should have frightened me. Instead, they made something inside me feel strangely relieved. All my life, I had been told that being an Omega meant I was weak, that my low rank was the reason people overlooked me, that I should be grateful for whatever place the pack gave me. But now someone was telling me that there had always been something else inside me. Something ancient, something powerful, something that had been hidden deliberately. Rowan walked toward the old wooden cabinet at the back of the room. He unlocked it. Then he removed a small leather case. My heart began racing. He placed it on the table. Inside was a collection of old documents. Some were so old that the edges had turned brown. Others were written in a language I didn't recognize. At the center was a drawing of a woman standing beneath a silver moon. Her eyes were glowing. Behind her stood wolves. Hundreds of them. I stared at the illustration. There was something familiar about her, the shape of her face, her eyes, the long dark hair. I looked at Rowan. "Who is she?" He answered softly. "The first Luna." Fingers trembled. Kalan stepped closer. "She was not the first Luna because she married the first Alpha." He paused. "She was the first because wolves followed her before there were Alpha kingdoms." I stared at the drawing. What could she do? Rowan opened another document. "Could awaken what was sleeping inside other wolves." I looked at him. "What does that mean?" "Some wolves are born with abilities that never fully develop. Certain bloodlines carry dormant gifts. The first Luna could awaken them." Continued. "She could strengthen a warrior's wolf beyond its natural limits. She could call ancient spirits from the forest. She could sense bloodline connections that ordinary wolves could never detect." I looked at my hands, and my mother had these abilities. She carried the blood. Looked at me. "And now you do." The room became silent. I remembered every strange thing that had happened since Adrian rejected me, the wound that disappeared, the animals that became calm around me, Rockin lowering his head, the storm, the wolves howling together, the strange voice inside my mind, the symbol, everything suddenly connected. I whispered, "Why didn't it awaken before?" Rowan's expression changed. "The bloodline has a condition." I looked at him. "What condition?" He hesitated. "The power doesn't awaken simply because the heir reaches a certain age." "Then what awakens it?" Kalan answered. "Betrayal." The word echoed through the room. I stared at him. He continued. "Not ordinary heartbreak, not disappointment. The bloodline responds to profound emotional betrayal." I felt cold. Why? Because the ancient wolf was created to survive the moment its own bond was turned against it. Looked at me. The stronger the betrayal, the stronger the awakening. Mind immediately returned to the great hall, Adrian standing beside Serafina. his announcement, his words. I never asked to be bound to an Omega, then the order that I serve my own sister. I remembered every humiliation, every night I cried alone, every time I watched Adrian pass me without acknowledging me, every time the mate bond reminded me that the man who had rejected me was still connected to me. I slowly understood. My suffering hadn't merely broken me. It had been waking something inside me. The rejection had been the first wound. The humiliation had deepened it. The loss of my home had pushed it further. Being forced to serve Serafina had nearly broken the final barrier. And the moment Adrian chose my sister publicly, the ancient blood inside me had begun answering. I touched my wrist. The symbol pulsed beneath my fingers. Pain awakened it. Nodded. That is why your mother was afraid. I looked at him. What happened to her? He lowered his eyes. Your mother discovered that someone within the Alpha bloodline knew about you. Stomach tight. Who? Rowan hesitated, then he said the words that changed everything. Adrian's father. I felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath me. Alpha Lucian. Yes, I shook my head. No, stepped closer. He knew before you were born. I looked at Rowan. You're telling me Adrian's father knew who my mother was. He knew the bloodline existed. He know about me? Yes. Breathing became uneven. Then why did he hide it? Rowan looked toward the old documents. Because he feared what would happen if the heir ever awakened. I stared at the drawing of the first Luna. Why would an Alpha fear someone like me? Kaelin answered. Because the first Luna's bloodline was never meant to serve the Alpha. The word struck me. What does that mean? Rowan looked directly into my eyes. The ancient Luna could not be commanded by an Alpha. He paused. She stood beside the Alpha as an equal. I remembered Adrian's words. His rejection. His belief that I wasn't strong enough to stand beside him. Then I remembered Serafina's manipulation. Political alliances, the questions about my family, the warnings, everything began fitting together. Adrian hadn't simply rejected me because he believed I was an Omega. Someone had convinced him that I was dangerous. But why? I looked at Rowan. What did his father do to my mother? Rowan's expression darkened. He ordered her to leave the territory. She refused to abandon you. My eyes filled with tears. What happened next? Kaelin answered. She was hunted. Alpha Lucian. Not directly. Then who? He looked toward the storm. His hunters. I felt sick. My mother had spent years raising me while people were searching for her. She had hidden her identity. She had pretended to be ordinary. She had watched me grow up knowing that one day someone might discover who I was. And when she died, I believed she had simply been sick. I had mourned her without knowing the truth. I had never known that she had been running from people who wanted to destroy our bloodline. I whispered, why didn't she tell me? Because she believed ignorance would keep you alive. I closed my eyes. For years I had thought my mother had left me with unanswered questions because she didn't trust me. Now I realized she had done it because she loved me. I opened my eyes. What does my bloodline actually make me? Rowan didn't answer immediately. Kaelin did. The last royal wolf. The words were almost impossible to accept. I looked at him. First Luna's descendants were not royal because they wore crowns. He pointed toward the ancient illustration. They were royal because the ancient wolves recognized them. I remembered Rockin, the horses, the birds, the wolves during the storm. They hadn't been afraid of me. They had recognized me. A shiver passed through my body. The ancient wolf inside me, Kaelin nodded. She has been asleep for years, but now she is awake. Yes. I thought about the voice from my dreams, the ancient white wolf, the words she had spoken. You already know. I finally understood who she was. She wasn't a stranger. She was part of me, an ancient part that had been waiting beneath my ordinary wolf, a part of my bloodline that had been sleeping until Adrian's betrayal gave it a reason to rise. I looked down at my hands. What happens now? Rowan's face became serious. Now you have to learn control. Why? Because awakening without control can destroy more than the people who hurt you. I stared at him. Can I hurt the pack? You could. His honesty frightened me. Powerful am I? Kaelin looked at Rowan. Neither wanted to answer. That silence told me more than words could have. Finally, Rowan spoke. We don't know. Your bloodline hasn't awakened in generations. I swallowed, and my mother, she never completed her awakening. Why? His eyes filled with sadness. She was hunted before she could. A sudden sound came from outside, a howl, then another. But this time something was different. The wolves weren't howling at the moon. They were facing the healing house, facing me, hundreds of them. I moved toward the window. Rowan grabbed my arm. Don't go outside. Why? Because they may follow you. Who? The ancient spirits. I stared at him. Before I could ask another question, a voice echoed through the forest, not an ordinary howl. It sounded like something much older, something that seemed to come from beneath the earth itself. My wolf rose inside me. The silver symbol on my wrist flared. The mark across my back burned. And for the first time, I heard my wolf speak clearly. They know who we are. I closed my eyes. A vision suddenly struck me. I saw my mother standing beneath the same silver moon. She was holding a newborn baby. Behind her stood a younger Alpha Lucian. He looked terrified. Then I saw another figure, a man wearing the blackthorn crest. He handed Lucian a sealed letter. My mother looked toward them. Fear filled her eyes. Then the vision disappeared. I opened my eyes. I was shaking. What did you see? Rowan asked. I looked at him. Mother knew Adrian's father, nodded, but there was someone else. His face changed. Don't know. I looked toward the door. But whoever he was there when my mother was hunted. Kaelin's expression became grim. Then the past has finally found you. I didn't understand. What do you mean? He looked at the symbol on my wrist. The bloodline awakening is only the beginning. I felt a chill. What comes after the awakening? Kaelin didn't answer. Rowan did. The people who feared your mother will realize that you survived. Hart stopped. When they come, Rowan looked at me. They won't come to negotiate. Outside, the wolves began howling again. This time I didn't feel afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt something else. Power. It moved beneath my skin like fire. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the Blackthorn territory, another howl answered. Then another. Then another. They weren't coming from our pack. They were coming from beyond the mountains. The ancient wolves had heard my awakening, and they were calling one another. But there was one truth I still didn't know. Adrian's father had hidden my bloodline from his son for a reason. He hadn't been afraid that I would destroy the Blackthorn pack. He had been afraid that one day Adrian would discover what his father had done to my mother. And when that day came, the Alpha's greatest enemy would not be the royal wolf sleeping inside me. It would be the truth. The night my power finally awakened, Seraphina made one mistake that changed the fate of the entire Blackthorn pack. She thought she was dragging a powerless Omega toward her punishment. She had no idea she was leading me directly toward the moment my ancestors had been waiting for. Seraphina knew. I could see it in her eyes before she said a single word. She had found out that I knew about my mother. She had discovered that Elder Rowan had finally told me the truth. For the first time since she began taking everything from me, she looked genuinely afraid. It happened the following evening. I had barely returned to the servants' quarters when the door flew open. Seraphina stood outside. 2 guards were behind her. Her face was pale, but her voice remained controlled. Come with me. I stayed where I was. Where? To the great hall. Stared at me. You know why? Heart began beating faster. I had spent the entire day thinking about everything Rowan and Kaelin had revealed. My mother's bloodline, the first Luna Alpha Lucian, the hunters, the ancient wolf inside me. I still had more questions than answers, but I had finally stopped pretending that my life had been ordinary. Seraphina stepped into the room. You went to see Elder Rowan. Wasn't a question. I said nothing. She moved closer. You were told to stay away from him. I was never told that. You were given orders. You gave me orders. You aren't my alpha. Her eyes hardened. For a moment I saw the frightened girl beneath the anger, then it disappeared. You think discovering some old family story makes you powerful. I looked at her. No. I paused. I think the truth makes me dangerous to people who have spent years hiding it. Her expression changed. That was the moment I knew she understood exactly what I meant. She had expected me to remain ignorant. She had expected me to continue cleaning her rooms, carrying her clothes, and lowering my eyes whenever she walked past. Instead, I was standing in front of her with questions she couldn't answer. Seraphina turned toward the guards. Take her. The guards moved forward. I stepped backward. You don't have the authority. She has been conspiring against the future Luna, Seraphina said. I stared at her. That isn't true. She has been meeting secretly with Elder Rowan. I went to him because he knew my mother. She has been spreading lies about the Alpha's family. I have told nobody anything. She has been trying to destroy my marriage. I almost laughed. Your marriage was built by destroying mine. The guards grabbed my arms. My wolf immediately reacted. Heat surged through my chest. The ancient mark on my wrist began to burn. I fought the sensation. Not yet. I didn't understand my power. I didn't know what would happen if I let it loose. Serafina saw the change in my expression. She stepped closer. "You're frightened." I looked directly at her. "I am." Her smile returned. "For once, you finally understand your position." I shook my head. Her smile faded. "I'm frightened because I don't know what I'm becoming." The guards dragged me through the corridor. Servants stepped aside. Some looked frightened, others looked away. Nobody stopped them, nobody except one person, Adrian. He appeared at the end of the corridor. He was wearing his black alpha coat. His expression changed the instant he saw me being dragged between two guards. "What is happening?" Serafina hurried toward him. "She has been caught conspiring against us." Adrian looked at me. "That true?" I stared at him. "You know it isn't." His eyes remained on mine. I could feel the mate bond. Even after everything, it was still there, stronger than before, painful, confusing, alive. He looked at the guards. "Release her." Serafina immediately stepped between us. "Adrian, you don't understand." "Then explain it." "She knows about the bloodline." The corridor became silent. Adrian's expression changed. His eyes moved toward me. I knew immediately that he had never expected me to learn the truth. "You told her?" he asked Serafina. "Then how does she know?" Serafina hesitated. "Rowan told her." Adrian looked at me. I saw conflict in his eyes. He knew something, perhaps not everything, but enough. I whispered, "Your father knew about my mother," his face tight. "Who told you that?" "Rowan." Adrian looked away. That reaction was all the confirmation I needed. "You knew," I said. He didn't answer. "You knew my mother was hunted, Elara. You knew your father was involved." "I didn't know everything." "But you knew enough to reject me." His expression hardened. "That isn't what happened." "Then tell me what happened." Remained silent. Serafina stepped forward. "She is manipulating you." I turned toward her. "You're the one who has been manipulating everyone." She slapped me. The sound echoed through the corridor. My face turned with the force of the blow. For several seconds nobody moved. Adrian stared at her. It was the first time I had ever seen genuine shock on his face because of something Serafina had done. He looked at her. "You struck her. She deserved it." "No." His voice was quiet. Serafina stared at him. Adrian stepped forward. That was enough. For one brief moment I thought he was finally going to defend me. Then Serafina whispered something to him. I couldn't hear it. Whatever she said made his expression change. Fear returned to his eyes. She looked at me. "Do you really want to know what happens if she awakens?" Adrian said nothing. Serafina continued. "The old records say the royal wolf cannot be controlled by an alpha." She looked at me. "Once she awakens, she will have power over every wolf in this territory." I watched Adrian's face. He knew, he believed her. Or perhaps he had heard the same warning from his father years ago. Serafina turned toward the guards. "Take her to the ceremonial chamber." Adrian's head lifted. "What are you doing?" "Making sure she cannot threaten this pack." "She hasn't attacked anyone. She will." "You don't know that." "I know what her blood can do." I looked at Adrian. "Are you going to let her do this?" He didn't answer. That silence hurt more than his rejection. I had thought the first betrayal was when he chose Serafina. I was wrong. The deeper betrayal was seeing him stand there while she decided what would happen to me. The guards dragged me into the ceremonial chamber. It was the same chamber where Adrian and I had first discovered our mate bond. The same place where I had believed fate had finally chosen me. Now chains hung from the stone pillars. Serafina entered behind me. Adrian remained at the doorway. I looked at him. "Please." Was the last time I asked him for anything. His eyes met mine. I saw pain there, but he still did nothing. Serafina approached. "You should have remained obedient." I laughed through my tears. "You were afraid of me before I even knew what I was." Her expression hardened. "Because I know what your kind becomes." "My kind?" She stepped closer. "Royal wolves don't belong beneath alpha rule." She lowered her voice. "That means you can never be allowed to become stronger than me." It was the truth. She didn't care about protecting the pack. She didn't care about Adrian. She wanted what was inside me. She wanted the power. She wanted the position. She wanted everything that belonged to the woman whose life she had stolen. I looked at Adrian. "You heard her." Remained frozen. Serafina ordered the guards to restrain me. They forced my arms against the stone pillar. The moment the restraints tight, pain shot through my body. My wolf growled. The ancient symbol on my wrist ignited. I heard a whisper, not from Rowan, not from Kaelan, from inside me. Enough. I closed my eyes. My breathing became uneven. Serafina continued speaking. You were born an Omega. Her voice became distant. You should have accepted that. Pulse of energy moved through my body, she continued. You should have been grateful Adrian ever noticed you. The restraints tightened, my vision blurred. You should have known your place. Something inside me snapped, not my body. Not my mind, something much older. The room suddenly went silent. I opened my eyes. The mark on my wrist was no longer silver. It was glowing like moonlight. The symbol spread upward across my arm, across my shoulder, down my ribs, across my back. The ancient markings moved beneath my skin as though they were alive. Serafina stepped backward. What is happening? Adrian moved toward me. Elara. I couldn't answer. The chamber filled with light. Moonlight poured through the windows even though clouds covered the sky. The stone beneath my feet began vibrating. The guards released me. They stumbled backward. Then something happened outside. A howl echoed through the territory, one wolf, then another, then hundreds. The sound grew until the entire mountain seemed to shake. Adrian looked toward the doors. What is happening? Serafina's face had lost all color. The wolves outside began moving toward the ceremonial grounds. Every warrior, every hunter, every ordinary wolf. They came from the houses, from the forests, from the mountains, from every corner of the territory. And then one by one they dropped to their knees. Not because Adrian commanded them, because something stronger had called them. I stepped forward, my feet touched the stone. The light around me grew brighter. The ancient mark had spread across my entire back. It reached my shoulders, my arms, my chest. It formed patterns that looked like silver branches beneath my skin. My eyes burned. I could hear everything, every heartbeat outside, every frightened breath. Every wolf moving through the territory. I could even hear Adrian's heart. It was beating faster than I had ever heard it. Then the mate bond exploded. The force knocked Adrian backward. He caught himself against the stone wall, his hand pressed against his chest. He stared at me in disbelief. The bond between us had always been painful after his rejection. Now it became something entirely different, powerful, overwhelming, almost impossible to resist. Adrian gasped. Elara. I looked at him. For the first time since he had rejected me, he looked at me the way he had on the night of the moon ceremony. Not as an Omega, not as a servant, not as someone beneath him, as his mate. But now there was fear mixed with the recognition. My wolf rose fully inside me. I felt her consciousness merge with mine. She wasn't the frightened creature who had spent years hiding inside my soul. She was ancient, calm, fierce, and powerful beyond anything I had imagined. Then her voice filled my mind. Remember who you are. I closed my eyes. A vision flashed before me. I saw the first Luna standing beneath the moon. Behind her were thousands of wolves. They weren't kneeling because she demanded it. They were kneeling because they recognized her. I saw my mother standing beside her. Then I saw myself. Not as an Omega, not as a servant, not as Adrian's rejected mate, as the heir, the final descendant, the royal wolf. My eyes opened. The entire chamber was silent. Serafina was trembling. Adrian couldn't move. Elder Rowan stood at the doorway. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered the truth that had been hidden from me all my life. The blood of the first Luna. The words echoed through the chamber. I looked toward Adrian. His face had completely changed. He finally understood why his father had feared my family. He finally understood why the ancient mark had appeared when we first touched. He finally understood why his father had hidden the truth. And he finally understood the cruelest part of his mistake. He had rejected the woman his own bloodline had been waiting for. He had humiliated her. He had stripped away her position. He had forced her to serve another woman. And now the entire pack was kneeling before her. Serafina slowly backed away. You can't control this, she whispered. I looked at her. No. Voice sounded different, stronger, older. Neither can you. She turned toward the door. Before she could move, every wolf outside growled at once. The sound shook the walls. Serafina froze. Adrian stared at me. Elara, please. I looked at him. 3 years earlier, I would have run into his arms. Tonight, I didn't move. The mate bond still connected us. But for the first time, I understood something important. Being his mate did not mean belonging to him. Fate had never created me to kneel before an alpha. It had created me to stand beside one. And if Adrian wanted me back now, he would have to face the truth he had spent so long running from. I was no longer the powerless Omega he had rejected. I was the last daughter of the first Luna, and my awakening had only just begun. The most frightening thing about my awakening was not the power itself. It was realizing that I finally had enough strength to destroy everyone who had hurt me, yet I no longer wanted to. For years, I had dreamed of the day Adrian would regret rejecting me. I had imagined watching him suffer the same pain he had given me. But when the entire pack knelt before me and he stood trembling across the chamber, I discovered something I had never understood before. I did not need revenge to prove that I had survived. I only needed to leave. The ceremonial chamber remained completely silent. Hundreds of wolves were still kneeling outside. The moonlight continued pouring through the windows, covering the stone floor in a pale silver glow. I could hear every heartbeat, every breath, every frightened whisper, every thought that people were too afraid to speak aloud. Yet beneath all that noise I heard something else, my own heartbeat, steady, calm. For the first time in years I wasn't afraid. I looked down at my hands. The ancient markings still glowed beneath my skin. They no longer felt like something foreign. They felt like a part of me that had finally come home. My wolf stood beside my consciousness. I could feel her strength, but there was no hunger for blood, no desire to punish anyone, no urge to tear the pack apart. She simply watched, waiting for me to decide what kind of woman I wanted to become. I looked toward the guards. They were still on their knees. Their weapons had fallen from their hands. None of them dared to approach me. I slowly raised my arms. The restraints around my wrists began to crack. Metal groaned beneath the pressure. I didn't pull, I didn't struggle, I simply stood there. The ancient power moved through my veins. The chains broke apart. Pieces of metal crashed onto the stone floor. The sound echoed through the chamber. Serafina flinched. Adrian stared at the broken restraints. I looked at my wrists. The marks left by the chains were already disappearing, another reminder of how quickly my body had changed. I took one step forward. Every wolf outside lowered its head further. I didn't command them. I didn't need to. They recognized what I carried. That realization should have frightened me. Instead, it made something inside me settle. I finally understood what Rowan had meant. Power wasn't the ability to force others to obey. Real power was knowing that you could command them and choosing not to. I turned toward Serafina. She was standing near the doorway. For the first time since I had known her, she looked small, not because I wanted her to be. Because the fear she had spent years hiding behind her arrogance had finally surfaced. She looked at my glowing eyes, then at the wolves outside. "You're going to kill me," she whispered. I shook my head. "No," she stared at me. "You could." "Yes." Voice remained calm. "I won't." She looked confused. "You hate me." I did. The truth surprised even me. "I hated you for taking everything from me." I took another step. "I hated you for turning Adrian against me." Her eyes narrowed. "I didn't turn him against you." I looked toward Adrian. He lowered his gaze. That was answer enough. I looked back at Serafina. "You didn't have to." Her expression changed. "You were already willing to believe the worst about me." Adrian closed his eyes. I could see the pain on his face. For years, I had wanted him to understand what he had done. Now he finally did. But understanding had come too late. I walked past Serafina. She didn't try to stop me. Nobody did. I reached the doorway, then I stopped. I could feel Adrian behind me. His presence had always affected me. Even before I understood the mate bond I had known when he entered a room. My body recognized him before my mind did. For years, that connection had made me feel trapped. Now it felt different. The bond was still there. But it no longer controlled me. I turned around. Adrian stood several feet away. He looked like a completely different man. The alpha who had once commanded thousands of wolves couldn't even meet my eyes. His shoulders were tense. His face was pale. His hand remained pressed against his chest where the mate bond had struck him. I stared at him. This was the man I had loved. The man who had once looked at me beneath the moon and told me that fate had chosen us. The man who had later told me that he never asked to be bound to an Omega. The man who had watched me become a servant. The man who had stood silent while Serafina ordered my punishment. And now he was afraid to look at me. I wanted to feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt tired. 3 years of pain had brought me to this moment. I had imagined it differently. I thought I would scream. I thought I would tell him how much he had destroyed me. I thought I would demand that he kneel. But when I looked at him, I realized that I had already received something far more valuable. I no longer needed him to validate me. I walked toward him. He finally lifted his eyes. Our gazes met. The mate bond surged between us. For one moment I felt every memory we had shared. The night beneath the moon, his hand touching mine, the warmth in his eyes, the promise I thought he had made. Then came the memories I had tried to bury, his rejection, his words, his decision, my mother's necklace lying in dirty water, the servants' quarters, the nights I cried alone, the wounds I treated in secret. The moment I begged him to stop Serafina and his silence. The memories came together, then something strange happened. They no longer hurt, they were still part of me. But they no longer controlled me. I understood why. The woman who had suffered those things was still inside me. But she had changed, she had survived, she had learned, she had awakened. Adrian whispered my name. Elara. I waited, he looked at me. I was wrong. Those 3 words would once have meant everything. Now they weren't enough. I said nothing. He took a step forward. I didn't know what my father had done. But you knew enough to doubt me. His face tightened. I was trying to protect the pack. You were trying to protect your position. Didn't deny it, I continued. You thought being alpha meant you had to control everything around you. I looked toward the kneeling wolves. You thought I needed to become smaller so you could remain powerful. Adrian swallowed. I was afraid. That confession surprised me. You, he nodded. Of what? He looked at the markings on my skin. Of losing control. I stared at him. You never had control over me. His eyes lowered. I know that now. I stepped closer. You wanted an omega you could control. Voice remained steady. You never realized I was born to command myself. The words settled between us. Adrian looked at me as though he had been struck. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, I still love you. Heart moved, just slightly. Enough for me to know that I wasn't completely immune to him. But love wasn't the same as trust. Love wasn't permission to return. Love wasn't an excuse for cruelty. And love could not erase the choices he had made. I looked at him. Then learned to love the woman I became without you. His eyes filled with pain. I walked past him. This time he didn't reach for me. He didn't command me to stop. He didn't invoke his authority. He simply watched. I walked through the great hall, the same hall where I had once been publicly rejected. The same hall where Serafina's wedding preparations had been taking place. The decorations were still everywhere, silver flowers, black candles, the blackthorn crest, the ceremonial banners. Everything had been prepared for their wedding. But now the hall was empty, the music had stopped. The servants stood along the walls, staring at me. I walked through the center of the room, nobody dared speak. When I reached the main doors, I looked back once. Adrian was standing at the far end of the hall. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically. Something inside him had changed. The authority that once filled every room he entered was gone, because he had finally discovered the one thing no alpha could command. A person who had chosen herself. I opened the doors. Cold night air touched my face. The wolves outside moved aside. They formed a path. I walked between them. No one followed. I crossed the courtyard. Then the gates opened. Beyond them was the forest, dark, unfamiliar, free. I stepped across the boundary. For the first time since my mother died, I was leaving without anyone telling me where I could go. I didn't know what waited beyond those mountains. I didn't know how to control the power inside me. I didn't know who had hunted my mother. I didn't know whether the ancient bloodline would bring enemies to my doorstep. But I knew I couldn't remain in the place where I had been taught to hate myself. I stopped beneath the trees. The moon appeared between the clouds. My wolf lifted her head. I could feel the ancient presence inside her. She wasn't afraid. Neither was I behind me. The gates remained open. Adrian still stood somewhere inside the packed territory. He could have followed. He could have ordered the guards to bring me back. He could have used every law and every tradition available to an alpha, but he didn't. Because for the first time, he understood something he should have understood years ago. I was no longer his possession. I was not his servant. I was not an omega waiting for his approval. I was his fated mate. But I was also my own person. And if he ever wanted a place in my life again, fate would not be enough. He would have to earn it. I disappeared into the forest. Behind me, Adrian finally understood that he had lost me. Not because another alpha had taken me. Not because the mate bond had disappeared. Not because I had stopped loving him. He had lost me because he had spent years teaching me how to live without him. And now that I had finally learned, he had no power to make me forget. The day I returned to Blackthorn territory, every wolf knew I was coming before the gates opened. I had been gone for months, months of silence, training, secrets, and learning how to live with the power that had once terrified me. But I had not returned for Adrian. I had returned because there were still unanswered questions about my mother, the first Luna, and the people who had hunted my bloodline. And when Adrian saw me again, he finally understood the cruelest truth of all. The woman he had once enslaved had become the one person he could no longer possess. 7 months had passed since I walked away from the Blackthorn pack. 7 months since I had broken the chains around my wrists. 7 months since I left Adrian standing inside the Great Hall, watching the woman he had rejected disappear into the forest. During those 7 months, I learned that power was not something you simply possessed. It was something you had to understand. Control came slowly. At first, I could barely summon my wolf without feeling the ancient energy tearing through my body. Sometimes my emotions caused the trees around me to tremble. Sometimes animals gathered outside my shelter while I slept. Once, during a training session with Elder Rowan, every candle in the room extinguished at the exact moment I became angry. Another time, I accidentally awakened the wolves resting deep within the northern forest. They came to the clearing and surrounded me. They did not attack. They simply watched. Rowan stood several feet away, observing carefully. "You are beginning to understand them," he told me. "I don't control them." "No," he smiled faintly. "That is precisely why they listen." I had finally begun to understand what the First Luna's power truly meant. It wasn't domination, it was recognition. The ancient wolves recognized something in my blood. They recognized the air. And the more I learned, the more I understood why my ancestors had been feared. I could feel dormant abilities in other wolves. I could sense when a wolf's spirit was weakened. I could even awaken certain gifts that had remained buried for generations. But Rowan warned me never to use that ability carelessly. "Blood can give strength," he told me. "It can also take control away from someone if you lose yourself." That frightened me more than any enemy could have, because I had spent too long being controlled by others. I never wanted to become the person who did the same thing to someone else, so I learned restraint. I learned patience. I learned to listen before acting. And slowly, the frightened Omega who had once believed she needed Adrian's protection disappeared. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, someone stronger, not because she had become cruel, because she no longer believed cruelty was necessary for survival. Then one morning, Rowan came to me with news. "The Blackthorn territory has requested your presence." I looked up, placed an old sealed letter on the table. "The Alpha Council is gathering." My eyes moved to the Blackthorn crest stamped into the wax. Why would they want me there? Rowan's expression became serious. "The other Alphas know who you are now." I stared at him. How the awakening was felt far beyond Blackthorn. He paused. "Your bloodline is no longer a secret." I looked toward the mountains. After everything that had happened, I had promised myself I would never return. Yet there were still unanswered questions. My mother's death, Alpha Lucian, the hunters, the mysterious man from the vision, and the ancient prophecy surrounding my blood. I couldn't hide forever. If my enemies knew I had awakened, staying away would not make me safer. It would only leave me ignorant. So I returned. I arrived at Blackthorn territory just after sunset. The gates opened before my carriage reached them. Nobody had announced my arrival. They didn't need to, the wolves knew. The moment I crossed the boundary, a strange silence fell over the territory. Conversations stopped, doors opened, people stepped into the streets. They remembered me. I could see it in their faces. The servant they had watched carry water, the Omega they had seen standing behind Seraphina, the healer who had secretly treated their wounds, the woman who had once walked out of the pack with nothing but her mother's necklace. But that woman was gone. I stepped from the carriage wearing a dark silver dress. My hair fell freely over my shoulders. The ancient mark remained hidden beneath my clothing, but I could feel it responding to the territory. The moment my feet touched the ground, the wolves surrounding the gates lowered their heads. A murmur passed through the crowd. Nobody had commanded them. They simply recognized me. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Elara." Heart stopped for half a second. I turned. Adrian stood at the top of the stone steps leading toward the Alpha's residence. 7 months had changed him too. He looked thinner, more tired. The arrogance I remembered was gone. but his eyes were the same, dark, familiar, still capable of reaching places inside me that I had spent months trying to protect. The mate bond erupted the moment our eyes met. It was stronger than before, much stronger. My breath caught. For one dangerous second, I forgot everything. I remembered the moon ceremony. His hand touching mine, the first time he called me his mate, the feeling of believing I had finally found home. Then I remembered the chains, the humiliation, his silence. The moment he chose my sister, I steadied myself. Adrian took one step down. I didn't move. He looked at me for several seconds. You came back. I nodded. For the council. Expression changed. Only for the council. Yes, he swallowed. I could see the answer hurt him. Once those words would have hurt me too. Now they simply felt true. He came closer. The mate bond pulled. I felt it, he felt it, but neither of us reached for the other. Adrian stopped several feet away. You look different. I am different, lowered his eyes. I know. Before he could say anything else, several riders entered the courtyard, 3 alphas from neighboring territories. I recognized none of them, but the moment they saw me, their wolves reacted. One alpha stepped from his horse. He stared at me, then he lowered his head. Royal blood. The other 2 followed. The entire courtyard fell silent. Adrian watched. His expression became difficult to read. These were alphas who would never bow to another wolf without reason. Yet they recognized what I carried. One of them approached. Father told me stories about the first Luna. I looked at him. She wasn't a story, smiled faintly. I know that now. The word spread through the crowd. Royal blood, first Luna, heir. People who had once called me an Omega were now whispering my true lineage. I looked toward the alpha residence. Serafina stood in one of the upper windows. She had watched everything. Her face had changed. She was no longer looking at me with arrogance. She was looking at me with fear. I wondered whether she finally understood. I hadn't returned to take her place. I didn't want her position. I didn't want her life. I didn't even want Adrian's crown. I had learned something during my time away. A throne wasn't valuable because other people wanted it. It was valuable only if you knew why you were sitting on it. And I had no intention of becoming someone who ruled through fear. The council meeting began that night. I entered the great hall, the same room where my life had once been destroyed. The same floor where I had stood while Adrian announced his engagement to my sister. This time, nobody laughed, nobody whispered, nobody looked at me as though I was beneath them. Every seat around the council table was occupied. Adrian sat at the center, but when I entered, he stood. The entire council followed. I stopped. For a moment, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The Alpha of Blackthorn was standing before me, not commanding, recognizing. I looked at him. You don't have to do that. His eyes remained on mine. I want to. I walked toward the table. There was an empty chair beside Adrian. He pulled it out. I didn't sit there. I chose the chair opposite him. Something flickered across his face, pain, but he accepted it. The meeting began. They discussed the ancient bloodline, the disappearance of the first Luna's descendants, the hunters who had operated in secret, the threats emerging beyond the mountains. And then Elder Rowan placed my mother's journal on the table. Same journal Serafina had discovered months earlier. Adrian looked at it. His expression darkened. Father knew. Yes, Rowan said, and he lied to me. Yes, Adrian looked at me. I should have known. I held his gaze. You should have listened. He lowered his eyes. The words remained between us. Then one of the visiting alphas spoke. There is something else. Everyone turned. He placed a map on the table. A section of the northern mountains had been marked with a black symbol. My scouts found this 3 weeks ago. Stared at it. I knew that symbol. My blood recognized it before my mind did. The ancient mark on my wrist began burning. Adrian noticed. Elara, I touched my wrist. The room suddenly felt colder. The symbol on the map was identical to the one that had appeared on my skin. Rowan stepped closer. That cannot be. I looked at him. What is it? His face had gone pale, the mark of the hunters. Heart began racing. I looked toward the northern mountains. Someone had been watching. Someone knew I had awakened. And someone had deliberately left a message for me. Adrian stood. We need to move the guards north. I looked at him. No, he frowned. If they wanted to attack us, they would have. I pointed toward the map. They want us to find this. Silence filled the chamber. Adrian looked at me differently, not as his former mate, not as an Omega, not as someone he needed to protect, as someone whose judgment he trusted. What do you think they want? I stared at the symbol. I think they want me to come to them. Adrian immediately shook his head. No, I looked at him. You don't command me anymore. His face tightened. I know. Then don't try. He took a slow breath. I wasn't trying to command you. What were you trying to do? His answer came quietly. Keep you alive. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The old Elara might have believed that was enough. The woman standing before him knew better. I looked at the map again. If they are connected to my mother, I need answers. Adrian stepped closer. And if it's a trap, I met his eyes. Then I'll face it. Shook his head. You shouldn't have to face everything alone. I felt the mate bond pull again, but I didn't reach for him. That was when Adrian finally understood. I had returned to Blackthorn. I was standing in the same place where he had once broken me. I was carrying a power that could shake the entire supernatural world. Other alphas recognized my blood. The wolves recognized my presence. And the man who once believed I needed him more than anything now had to watch me walk into danger without asking for his permission. He had spent years believing that being my alpha gave him the right to decide my future. Now he understood that he had lost that privilege long before I left. The most painful part for him wasn't that I hated him. It was that I no longer needed him. And somewhere beyond the northern mountains, the people who had hunted my mother were waiting. They had seen my awakening. They knew I had returned, and they had left their symbol where they knew I would find it, because they weren't calling for Adrian, they were calling for me. The truth about Serafina was worse than I expected. She had not stolen Adrian simply because she wanted to become Luna. She had been searching for something far more valuable than a crown. She wanted the power in my blood. And when the Moon Council finally arrived at Blackthorn, they brought a prophecy that revealed the betrayal, my mother's death, Adrian's father's secrets, and my rejection had all been connected from the beginning. The doors of the Great Hall opened before anyone could respond to the warning on the map. Every head turned. A cold wind swept through the chamber. 6 figures entered. They wore long silver robes embroidered with the symbol of the crescent moon. The Moon Council had arrived. I had heard stories about them since childhood. They were said to be older than most alpha bloodlines. They answered to no pack. They existed to protect the ancient laws governing werewolves. Yet seeing them standing before me made me realize that the stories had never captured how powerful they truly were. The oldest member walked forward. Her hair was completely white, but her posture remained straight. Her eyes settled on me. She didn't bow. Instead, she placed one hand over her heart. Daughter of the first Luna. The words traveled through the hall. Every wolf became silent. Adrian stood beside the council table. What brings the Moon Council to Blackthorn? The woman looked at him. The truth. Her gaze returned to me. The truth can no longer be hidden. Stomach tightened. I already knew there were secrets surrounding my mother. I knew Adrian's father had known about my bloodline. I knew hunters had pursued my family, but I didn't know how much Serafina knew. The council elder turned toward the upper balcony. Bring her down. Looked toward the entrance. Serafina appeared between 2 guards. She was no longer dressed like the future Luna. Her expensive gown had been replaced by a simple dark dress. Her face looked exhausted. But when her eyes met mine, I saw something I had never seen there before: defeat. She walked into the chamber. The council elder faced her. Serafina Blackthorn, you are accused of concealing knowledge concerning the royal bloodline. Serafina remained silent. You are also accused of manipulating the alpha of Blackthorn into rejecting his fated mate. Still nothing. And you are accused of attempting to obtain the power carried by the last descendant of the first Luna. Adrian turned toward her. You knew? Serafina looked at him. I knew enough. His expression hardened. How long? She lowered her eyes. Before the moon ceremony. The room erupted in whispers. I felt my chest tight. She had known before Adrian discovered I was his mate. She had known what I carried. She had watched the bond awaken between us while already understanding what it meant. I stared at her. You knew who I was. Yes. Before he touched me. Yes. Before he rejected me. She hesitated. Yes. Answer hurt more than I expected. I had spent months believing that Serafina had acted out of jealousy. Now I realized jealousy had only been the surface. She had been calculating. She had seen my bloodline as an opportunity. I asked the question that had been burning inside me. Why? Serafina looked at me. Because I wanted what you had. You wanted Adrian. She shook her head. I wanted what Adrian could never give me. Her eyes moved toward the glowing mark on my wrist. Power. The hall became silent. Serafina continued. You think I cared about becoming Luna? She laughed bitterly. Being Luna would have made me powerful inside one territory. Your blood could have made me powerful everywhere. I stared at her. You destroyed my life for that. I tried to control the situation before your awakening. You enslaved me. I needed you close. You humiliated me. I needed you emotionally broken. The words struck like a blade. Adrian stepped forward. You deliberately pushed her toward awakening. Serafina looked at him. I didn't know the betrayal would awaken her so quickly. Adrian's face changed. What did you think would happen? I thought the bloodline would remain dormant. She looked at me. I was wrong. I felt my hands tight. You knew the condition. Yes. You knew emotional betrayal could awaken me. Serafina nodded. And you still did it. She looked away. I underestimated the bloodline. I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. The rejection, the humiliation, the servants' quarters, the punishments, the wedding, none of it had been random. She had deliberately tried to push me toward a breaking point while believing she could control what happened afterward. Then the Moon Council elder spoke. Serafina did not discover this information herself. I looked at her. What do you mean? The elder opened a leather case. Inside were several old documents. The information came from the private records of Alpha Lucian. Adrian froze. Father? Yes. The council elder placed the documents on the table. Your father's private archives contained records concerning the first Luna's descendants. Stared at them. Why would he have those? Because your father was not merely protecting the Blackthorn bloodline. She paused. He was protecting the prophecy. I felt a strange pressure build inside my chest. What prophecy? The elder opened an ancient scroll. The parchment was yellowed with age. The writing across it was almost impossible to read. But one sentence had been translated beneath the original text. She read it aloud. When the blood of the first Luna returns, the divided kingdom shall become one. Moved, the elder continued. The heir shall rise from the lowest rank, and those who attempted to bind her shall kneel before her. A chill traveled through me from the lowest rank, the Omega. My entire life suddenly seemed to rearrange itself. I had spent years believing that being born an Omega meant I was destined to remain beneath everyone else. But the prophecy had described someone exactly like me, an heir hidden among the lowest rank, someone who would rise after being rejected, someone whose awakening would change the balance between the kingdoms. I looked at Adrian. He was staring at the prophecy as though he couldn't accept what he was reading. The council elder continued. The heir shall not unite the kingdoms through conquest. Her eyes settled on me. She shall unite them through blood, choice, and alliance. I whispered, that's why the neighboring alphas recognized me. Yes, that's why my bloodline was feared. Adrian looked at the documents. My father knew. The council elder nodded. He knew that if you discovered the truth too soon, your relationship with Elara could become the foundation of a new alliance. Adrian's face tightened. Then why hide it? The elder's expression became grave. Because your father believed the prophecy would destroy the Blackthorn dynasty. I looked at Adrian. His father had not merely feared my power. He had feared losing control of the future. If I stood beside Adrian as an equal, the Blackthorn Alpha would no longer be the unquestioned center of the werewolf kingdoms. The prophecy promised something bigger, unity. And unity meant old divisions would disappear. Old Alpha families would lose some of their authority. Ancient rivalries would end. Packs that had spent generations fighting would have a reason to stand together. My bloodline threatened every system built around fear and separation. The council elder turned toward Serafina. You found the records. Serafina nodded. How? My mother had access to the Alpha archives. Adrian stared at her. You went through my father's private records. I was looking for information about the bloodline. You knew what those records contained. Yes. You know about the prophecy. Serafina hesitated. I knew part of it. Adrian looked devastated. You knew everything. No, she shook her head. I knew enough to believe I could change the outcome. I looked at her. How? She looked at me. I thought if you remained powerless, I could take your place. You could never take my blood. I didn't need your blood. Her voice became bitter. I only needed access to it. The council elder interrupted. And that is where your plan failed. Serafina looked toward her. Because the power does not belong to anyone who attempts to steal it. Elder turned toward me. It responds only to the rightful heir. I looked at the mark on my wrist. The silver symbol pulsed softly. The ancient wolf inside me stirred. I finally understood my power had never belonged to Adrian. It had never belonged to Seraphina. It had never belonged to the Moon Council. It had always belonged to me. The person who had tried hardest to control me had only helped awaken the very power she feared. Seraphina looked toward Adrian. I thought you would choose me, stared at her. You manipulated me. I protected you. You destroyed my mate. I protected the pack. No, Adrian's voice became colder. You protected yourself. Seraphina's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, I felt no satisfaction watching her suffer. I simply felt tired. The council elder rolled the prophecy closed. There is one final truth. I looked at her. What? She walked toward me. The prophecy was never about Adrian. My heart skipped. What do you mean? She looked at the alpha sitting behind me. The first Luna's descendant was never destined to become the mate of the strongest alpha. She turned back toward me. She was destined to become the bridge between all of them. I felt the room become strangely still. My entire life, I had believed my greatest destiny was connected to Adrian. That because he was my fated mate, my future must somehow be tied to his. But fate had never promised that. The bond between us was real. The love I had once felt was real. But my purpose was larger than a marriage, larger than one pack, larger than one alpha. I looked toward the great hall windows. Beyond them were countless territories, hundreds of packs, generations of rivalries. Families divided by ancient hatred. And somewhere beyond the mountains were the people who had hunted my mother. I finally understood why the ancient wolf had awakened. It wasn't simply to make me powerful. It had awakened because the world around me was changing. And I was at the center of that change. Adrian slowly approached. He stopped several feet away. I thought fate had given me you. I looked at him. Fate didn't give me to you. His eyes lowered. I know. You were supposed to walk beside me. Looked up. I failed. I didn't answer because there was nothing else to say. The council elder watched us carefully. Adrian Blackthorne, the prophecy does not require you to become her king. His face tightened. What does it require? Nothing. She looked at me. Only that you decide whether you are worthy of standing beside her. The words settled heavily in the chamber. Adrian looked at me. For once, he didn't ask me to return. He didn't ask me to forgive him. He didn't use the mate bond to pull me closer. He simply stood there. And somehow, that meant more than an apology. I looked at Seraphina. She had wanted my power. She had wanted my place. She had believed that destroying me would allow her to become something greater. But she had misunderstood the prophecy. My destiny had never been about taking her place. It had been about becoming someone who no longer needed another person's place to define her. I looked toward the ancient scroll. The words echoed inside my mind. The heir shall rise from the lowest rank. For years, I had thought being an Omega was the greatest humiliation of my life. Now I understood that it had been part of my story. I had risen from the place where everyone expected me to remain. I had survived rejection. I had survived enslavement. I had survived betrayal. And now I knew why. I was never meant to remain beneath anyone. I was never meant to spend my life serving another person's ambition. I was never meant to become a prize passed between powerful wolves. I was the last descendant of the first Luna. And according to the prophecy, my greatest challenge had not been surviving Adrian's rejection. It was learning what to do with the power that came after it. The council elder looked toward the northern mountains. The hunters have already learned that you are alive. The room became tense, and they know about the prophecy. I felt my wolf awaken beneath my skin. Adrian noticed. What happens now? The elder looked at me. Now the divided kingdoms will begin choosing sides. I stared toward the darkness beyond the windows. Somewhere out there, enemies were waiting. Somewhere, the people responsible for hunting my mother were preparing for my arrival. And somewhere beyond the mountains, an ancient kingdom that had disappeared from history was about to reveal itself. The prophecy had awakened. The kingdoms would soon have to decide whether they would stand with the last daughter of the first Luna, or stand against her. The truth had finally been exposed, but the hardest part was still waiting for me. Adrian had lost his authority. Seraphina had lost her place, and the ancient prophecy had revealed that my destiny was far greater than anyone had imagined. Yet there was one thing the prophecy had not answered. Why had my mother been hunted, and who had been waiting all these years for my power to awaken? I would soon discover that the betrayal inside Blackthorne was only the beginning. The great hall remained silent after the Moon Council finished reading the prophecy. No one moved, no one whispered. Even the wolves outside seemed to understand that something had changed. For years, the Blackthorn pack had been ruled by one simple belief. The Alpha commanded, the pack obeyed. But that night the old order had cracked, and Adrian was the first person to acknowledge it. He stepped away from the council table and walked toward the center of the hall. Every eye followed him. He stopped beneath the enormous blackthorn crest hanging above the throne. Then he turned toward the pack. I remained where I was. I didn't know what he was about to say, but something inside me told me that this moment mattered. Adrian looked at the wolves surrounding the chamber. His voice carried across the hall. I owe the entire pack the truth. Nobody interrupted. He continued. I rejected my fated mate. A murmur moved through the room. I allowed another person to manipulate my judgment. His eyes lowered briefly. I watched Elara lose her position, her home, and her dignity. Swallowed. I did nothing. The words were difficult for him. I could see it. Adrian had spent his entire life being trained to appear invincible. Now he was standing before his people and admitting that he had failed. He looked toward me. I told myself that I was protecting the pack. His voice became quieter. The truth is that I was protecting my pride. No one spoke. I was afraid of what people would think if my fated mate was an Omega. Took a breath. I was afraid that choosing her would make the other alphas question my strength. His jaw tightened. I chose what looked safe. His eyes met mine. I destroyed the person who trusted me. Moved inside my chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but something human. I had wanted him to admit it for so long, not privately, not when nobody was listening. I wanted him to acknowledge what he had done where everyone could hear. And now he was doing exactly that. Adrian turned toward the servants. Everyone who watched Elara suffer and remained silent, I understand why you were afraid. Then he looked at the warriors. To everyone who obeyed my orders, you followed the command of your alpha, but that does not erase what happened. Finally, he faced the council. I accept responsibility for my choices. The Moon Council elder watched him carefully. You understand what that means? Yes. It means the consequences may affect your position. Adrian nodded. I understand. The council elder said nothing else. Adrian looked back at me. He walked closer. This time he stopped several steps away. He did not touch me. He did not attempt to use the mate bond. He didn't even ask me to come closer. He simply stood there. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. Elara, I don't deserve another chance. Heart tightened. If you ever allow me one, he continued, I'll spend the rest of my life earning it. The words hung in the air. Once I would have accepted them immediately. Once hearing Adrian admit that he wanted me would have been enough to erase every painful memory. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I had learned that love without respect could become a prison. I had learned that a mate bond could connect two souls without guaranteeing that either person knew how to love properly. And I had learned that forgiveness was something I could choose. It was not something anyone could demand. I looked at him. I believe you are sorry. His eyes lifted. But being sorry doesn't change what happened. I know. You can't give me back the years I lost. I know. You can't erase the nights I spent believing there was something wrong with me. His face tightened. I know. I took a slow breath. Then understand something. I stepped closer. Love doesn't erase what you did. His eyes remained on mine. If you want me back, you'll have to prove that the man I loved still exists. He nodded slowly. I will. I shook my head. Don't promise. He stopped. Show me. 2 words carried everything I needed him to understand. I didn't want another declaration. I didn't want another beautiful speech. I didn't want promises made beneath the moon only to be forgotten when fear returned. If Adrian wanted another place in my life, he would have to become someone worthy of it, and that would take time. Perhaps a very long time. We stood apart. The distance between us was only a few feet, yet it represented years of pain, years of choices. Years of things that could never be undone. Outside, the moon began rising above the mountains. Silver light entered through the tall windows. It touched the floor between us. For a moment, everything was peaceful. Then my wolf spoke. I froze. She had been quiet since the council began speaking about the prophecy. Now her voice entered my mind with a seriousness I had never heard before. Elara. I closed my eyes. What is it? Her presence became stronger. There is another royal bloodline. My eyes opened. The words sent a chill through me. Another royal bloodline. I looked toward the mountains. The ancient mark on my wrist began glowing. Adrian noticed immediately. What happened? I didn't answer. I walked toward the window. The entire room watched me. The moonlight fell across the northern peaks. Something was there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. A presence, ancient, powerful, familiar. My wolf whispered again. They have been waiting. Breathing stopped. For me, the answer came immediately. For your awakening. A distant howl echoed across the mountains. It was unlike any wolf howl I had ever heard. It was deeper, older, almost haunting. Every wolf in Blackthorn territory lifted its head. The entire pack became restless. Another howl answered from farther away, then another. The sound traveled across the mountains. Adrian moved toward me. What is that? I stared into the darkness. I don't know. Deep inside, I knew the truth. Something had recognized me. Something connected to the ancient blood that flowed through my veins, something that had been silent for generations, and now it was awake. Adrian stood beside me, but he didn't touch me. He simply looked toward the mountains. That another pack? I shook my head. What is? Watch the distant peaks. Wolf says there is another royal bloodline. Adrian's expression changed. The prophecy mentioned only one. I know. Howl echoed. This time the sound was closer. The wolves outside began growling. The Moon Council elder rushed toward the window. Her face became pale. No, I turned toward her. You know that howl? She stared into the darkness. I haven't heard it since I was a child. What is it? She looked at me. The last time that bloodline appeared, 3 kingdoms disappeared. The room went silent. My heart began pounding. What bloodline? The elder hesitated. Then she whispered a name that had been erased from almost every ancient record. The Shadow Crown. A cold sensation moved through my body. My wolf suddenly became alert. Not go toward them. For the first time since my awakening, I felt fear return, not fear for myself, fear of what my existence might awaken. The Shadow Crown had been waiting for my bloodline to return, waiting for the first Luna's heir to awaken. And now they knew I was alive. Adrian looked at me. Whatever is beyond those mountains, you don't have to face it alone. I looked at him. Months earlier, those words would have made me feel safe. Now they made me wonder whether Adrian could actually stand beside me when the next battle came, because the danger approaching us was different. It wasn't Serafina. It wasn't the Blackthorn Pack. It wasn't even the Alpha Council. It was something ancient, something powerful, something that had apparently been waiting generations for my return. I looked toward the moon. The ancient symbol on my wrist burned brighter. Then, from somewhere beyond the mountains, a final howl rose into the night. My wolf answered. And every wolf in Blackthorn went silent. I knew then that the first battle had already begun, not with a sword, not with blood, with recognition. Someone had felt my awakening. Someone had been waiting for me. And now that I had finally discovered who I was, they were coming to find me.